Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at something that absolutely transforms how we experience fiction, and honestly, how we process stories in general. We're talking about the narrative lens. Think of every story you read as a camera. The author, well, they're the one holding that camera, and they're choosing exactly where to point it, what to keep sharp in focus, and what to just blur out. In fiction, there's really no such thing as a truly neutral story. Every single event is filtered through a specific voice. So let's look at exactly how that works.
When you crack open a book, it is so incredibly easy to just accept the words on the page as the absolute objective truth of that world. But have you ever stopped to consider that every story you read is actually fundamentally biased? It totally is. The narrator is constantly making choices for you. Okay, let's dive into this, because today, you and I are going to act as detectives and uncover the hidden mechanics behind how stories manipulate our perspective. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The narrative lens. 2. First-person and unreliable narrators. 3. The second-person experience. 4. Exploring third-person perspectives. And finally 5. Why point of view matters. It's going to be a fascinating journey, from super intimate up-close lenses all the way out to wide, all-knowing perspectives. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the narrative lens.
So the absolute crucial point here is understanding the difference between what happens in a story and how it's actually told. Point of view, or POV, is basically the position from which a story is told. It completely controls your access to the fictional world. It answers those big questions like, who is speaking? Who actually sees these events playing out? Narration and POV, they work hand in hand, just like a camera lens. They dictate not just what actions are happening, but who is witnessing them, what secrets are being kept from us, and ultimately, how we're supposed to feel about the whole shebang.
The difference between these two scenarios brilliantly illustrates exactly what I mean. Just imagine you have a plot, the exact same series of events. First, imagine that story is told directly by a trauma survivor who actually lived through it. Now, imagine those exact same events told by a completely detached, outside observer. The plot itself hasn't changed one single bit, right? But the emotional distance, the bias, the overall tone, and your sympathy as a reader? Totally different. That is the sheer power of the narrative lens.
Let's zoom that camera lens all the way in for Section 2. First-person and unreliable narrators. In first-person narration, the storyteller is a literal character physically existing inside the fictional world. You're going to recognize this instantly through pronouns like I, me, my, we, and our. Now, because we are locked right inside this person's head, our knowledge is strictly limited. We only know what this single character thinks, what they physically witness with their own eyes, or, what other characters happen to tell them. We are entirely boxed in by their reality. Just listen to how immediate this feels. I could hear the floorboards creaking upstairs long after everyone had gone to sleep. Do you feel that? Because of that single word I, you aren't just passively watching a character be scared. You are trapped in that dark house with them, straining to hear the exact same terrifying sounds. The reader gets to experience the fear right alongside the character.
But hold on a second. You're inside their head, sure, but can this narrator actually be trusted?
Let's see how this builds into one of the absolute most thrilling concepts in literature, the unreliable narrator. Because first-person narration is so deeply inherently human, it's almost always emotionally biased and incomplete. I mean, sometimes the narrator might just flat out lie to you. They might be mentally unstable, or maybe they're just a kid and totally lack the maturity to understand what they're actually seeing. Or maybe they're intentionally trying to manipulate you to take their side. When an author uses an unreliable narrator, they are forcing you, the reader, to step up, read between the lines, and figure out what the real truth actually is.
All right, let's step into a slightly more unusual, experimental space with Section 3, the second-person experience. Second-person narration uses the pronoun you. Think about how forceful that word really is. I mean, I'm using it with you right now. When an author writes you, they are temporarily breaking the fourth wall. It's like they're reaching right out of the text, grabbing you by the collar, and dropping you directly into the action of that fictional world.
Feel the immediacy of this one. You walk into the empty room and immediately sense something is wrong. It is incredibly direct, isn't it? It completely strips away that safe, cozy distance you usually have as a reader. Now, it's not some fictional character in danger, it's you.
Now, because of how aggressive and in-your-face it can feel, you won't see second-person narration in everyday fiction very often. It's deeply immersive, sure, but it can also be highly uncomfortable and even confrontational. Writers mostly deploy this bold lens in experimental literature, in intense psychological horror, or, if you remember these from when you were a kid, in choose-your-own-adventure narratives, where you literally make the decisions.
Let's pull that camera lens way back now as we move into Section 4, Exploring Third-Person Perspectives.
Now, what's really interesting here is seeing how narrators can exist completely outside the story itself, using he, she, or they. And there are three main flavors to this. First, we have third-person limited. This is where the camera tracks just one character super closely. We see Maria staring at the letter, and we get to know her private inner thoughts. Then we have third-person omniscient. This is your all-knowing, godlike camera. We know Daniel thinks the fight is over, but we also know Elise is already planning to leave him. And finally, we have the objective perspective. This is strictly observable actions. He folded the letter. We get absolutely zero internal thoughts here. It's this pure cinematic mystery where you have to guess what the character is feeling just by watching what they do.
I really want to highlight this omniscient example for a second. Daniel believed the argument was over, but across town, Elise was already planning to leave him forever. Do you see what the author just did there? An omniscient narrator builds massive dramatic irony by giving us, the audience, knowledge that goes way beyond what Daniel knows. We're practically sitting there wanting to yell at Daniel to wake up, all because the narrator chose to give us a much broader view of the world.
Before we completely leave perspectives behind, we absolutely have to mention stream of consciousness. This is a really specific technique of narrative distance that attempts to capture the chaotic, continuous, totally nonlinear flow of a character's actual mind. So instead of neat, organized sentences, the author uses fragmented thoughts, sudden memory shifts, and pure sensory impressions. It is perfectly designed to imitate what it actually feels like to be inside a rushing, real human consciousness.
Which brings us to our final takeaway in Section 5, why point of view matters. So, why do all of these highly technical choices actually matter? Well, they matter because point of view entirely changes the meaning of the story. Imagine this comparison for a second. Think of a murder mystery told from the perspective of the killer. You're right inside the mind of the hunted, feeling their paranoia, maybe even kind of understanding their twisted logic. Now flip it. Imagine that exact same murder mystery told by the brilliant detective. Suddenly, it's a puzzle to be solved, a noble pursuit of justice. The events are identical, but POV is never ever accidental. It completely changes what we know, what we believe to be true, and exactly how we judge the characters on the page.
So I want to leave you with a really fun, practical toolkit for your own reading life. Next time you open up a story, don't just passively read the words. Be a detective. Ask yourself, who is really telling the story? What do they actually know, and more importantly, what are they hiding from me? Can I actually trust this person? What personal biases are shaping the way they describe the world? And finally, does this narrator even understand the full meaning of the events they're participating in? If you use these questions, you'll start revealing the underlying psychology and exposing the real truth of the text.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for the day. In the stories you consume, whether we're talking about books, movies, or even the daily news, what is the narrator failing to understand? The next time you dive into a narrative, remember to look at the lens itself, not just the picture it takes. Because in fiction, and honestly in life, how a story is told matters just as much as what actually happens. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those great questions, and I will see you next time.